Hello everyone, this is FIDE Master Viktor Neustroyev and thank you for joining our webinar. This webinar is devoted to Stafford Gambit. I'm going to show you how to play Stafford Gambit with white pieces to be able to successfully defeat your opponent, even despite of what his level is. At least you'll be able to get a much better position. Okay, so we are waiting for more attendees to come. I'm streaming this webinar on Twitch as well as on YouTube. Okay, so guys, please let me know if the sound is good and the camera is fine. I'm sure you can see the board. So today we are going to talk about Stafford Gambit 96 in the Russian game. I've already recorded a short video clip of it's just a kind of a small summary of what you should play, but today we are going to get deeper into details. Okay, so this is my YouTube channel and I kindly recommend you to subscribe. So right now I'm streaming webinar 90. I also did 2 simuls this week. And this is a short video that I was talking about how to beat Stafford Gambit. It's only 8 minutes for 41 seconds. So if you want to learn just the basics, you may watch this video. If you want to get deeper into details, understand black plans, learn all deviations of what white can exactly play to be able to get better, then you are in the right place. Today we are going to talk about it and analyze different not grandmasters, but title players games where black applied several ideas, and we will discuss of how to play against them. So don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. This is the link. What else? So this is my chess.com profile. So you can send me a friend request if you didn't before. And this is our educational group, Tricks of Chess. So you can find the recordings of our previous webinars here. So this is the group, join, and tomorrow I'm going to announce pairings for the players who are going to participate in my next tournament, Honest Chess Leagues. So just let me tell you a little bit about this tournament. It will be a round-robin tournament where I divided all the players into 3 different leagues, and the players of the Premier League will be fighting for the money prize. The first and the second league, well, of course, the winners can pass into the next league. So, for example, if you're the winner of the second league, you can next time get to the first league. Similar to soccer championship. For example, soccer championship in Italy, Spain, or even in Russia. Okay, what else? This is my website. I'm sure you know it. For example, if you're interested in some news, I've published of course, how to beat Stafford Gambit, and maybe you're interested in becoming a chess grandmaster post. So I've just tell you about my thoughts of what you should do to be able to become a grandmaster. If you need the link, here it is. Okay, fine, let's go back to our today's webinar. Before that, let me quickly answer the questions. So the question is of how can I register for the tournament? Sorry, but it's not possible. You can't register for the tournament. I only accept my students. So if you were my student, then you could participate. So why I don't accept anybody else? It's because of cheating. So last time I accepted a guy who I consider it was a good person, and maybe I can call him a friend of mine, but he cheated. So, and it was a kind of a scandal. So that's why this time I only accept those who I train. Okay, so let's start with the webinar anyway. Now, so to become my student, you should take private classes, enroll into my courses, or buy a coaching program on my website. e4, e5, it starts like a Russian game. Knight f3, knight f6, knight takes e5. So you know it's quite common here to play d6. Sorry, d6 to chase the knight. Knight goes to f3. Black captures on e4, and in this position, white can play either knight c3 or d4. For example, knight c3 is quite popular nowadays, and especially Sergei Karyakin prefers to play this move instead of d4. No, this is just a classical variation of Russian game or Petroff Defense, but maybe in a few months I've met several times that people play knight c6, even against me, and of course against a lot of my students and other club players. Of course, you know that such international master as Eric Rosen prefers playing knight c6 and Stafford Gambit. He likes it. However, I'm sure he understands that if white plays properly, there will be no advantage for him. Okay, so knight c6. What should we do? If we move the knight back, we lose the central pawn and the position becomes equal. But if we take, they take with the d pawn to open up the bishop, then we can try to save the pawn, and this is how we'll get an extra pawn. And here black's task is to get some compensation. What can we do? There are two good moves, d3 or knight c3. However, knight c3 is more complicated. If you play knight c3, they play bishop c5, and then it's difficult to suggest a move. Probably the next move can be h3. But then they play queen d4, and we have to move our queen to f3 to support the pawn. White is better and is still playable. Okay, okay, so you suggested e4, e5, which of course makes sense, but knight goes to d5, then d4. Actually, let's check what people play. I know e5 is not common. Your advantage in case of d3 or knight c3 is much better than in case of e4, e5. Okay, in one of the games here it was knight e4, d4 and queen h4, which actually doesn't offer any advantage for black. So e5 is also playable, but it's not as best as d3, the move that I recommend. So Developing the knight looks like a good idea, but I kindly recommend you playing d3, supporting the pawn with your d pawn. Why? Because when you play knight c3, it prevents your idea of playing c3, d4 to close this diagonal. That's the problem. Okay, d3. How do they play? Bishop c5, of course. Everyone plays bishop c5 in this position. And here you have to play bishop e2 to secure the g4 square. Because if, for example, you play something else, let's say knight c3, then your opponent can react with knight g4, after which your f2 pawn is hanging. And there is not much you can do, maybe in bishop e3 and give up a pawn. If, for example, you play even bishop to g5, what do you think black can play? Yeah, thank you. So it's knight takes e4. What's the idea of knight e4? Oh, with this move, black sacrifices the queen, but then they checkmate. This is a typical trap that you may face in Stafford Gambit if you don't play this opening properly. That's why instead of anything else, play bishop e2 to secure the g4 square. The best move, according to the computer, here is knight g4, giving up the knight, but gaining the bishop back after queen h4. However, knight g4 was never played in practice. I usually faced with h5 move, which we are going to discuss a little bit later. So knight g4, bishop g4, queen h4, threatening f2 and g4. What do you think white should do to get the maximum advantage in this position? Please suggest the move for white. And I wonder why today we have only 12 attendees on Twitch. Usually we have about 20. Oh, g3, queen g4. I think so. So I don't want to create a weakness with g3. Yeah, castle makes sense. And queen f3. Queen f3 looks better, because if now he takes on g4, just play queen g3 to offer a trade. And if he trades, there is no compensation for the pawn. If he doesn't trade but plays maybe this move, you can play f3 and capture on g7, or you can just capture on c7 directly. But g7 is better. They castle, or so they play king d7, but they can castle as well. Just queen h6 to offer a trade, and if they don't accept it, you develop your pieces with knight c3, bishop e3. Your position is solid and you are already 2 pawns up. Fine. Let's go back. The move that I met was h5 here, and it's actually one of the popular moves in club players games, so in my students games as well. So what should we do? They would like to play this move. Of course, something like h3 definitely would work, but there is a better move, c3. Now knight g4, but we can just play d4. What do people do usually? They usually get to d6. At least this is what I saw in my students games, bishop d6. e5, bishop e7, h3, knight goes back, and you can capture on h5, or you may not, but the position is much better. I would say it's almost winning. Just activate your pieces and take the advantage of your extra pawn and the strong pawn chain. So d4, what else can be played? Of course, queen h4, threatening a dangerous check on f2. What should you do? g3, definitely g3, they go there, and then f3 looks attractive, and if you prefer playing sharp positions, you should play such a move. If not, then just bishop f3. It's simple. Bishop e7, no, it was hanging h3, knight goes to the edge of the board, and it's completely winning. You are one pawn up, plus you have the center, space, and maybe even better development. If you play f3, which looks attractive because two minor pieces are hanging simultaneously, they will play h4. You capture the knight, they capture the pawn. Actually, it's still okay because bishop e3 secures your position. Why? For example, rook h2, then rook g1 is enough. So they can't promote. G takes h2, just take on c5 and you successfully stop the pawn. Looks dangerous, but it works. White wins. Let's say bishop e7, just bishop f3. Rook h2, rook h2, g takes h2, king e2, and you successfully secure the queen square. Still fine. So this is what you should learn. Once again, let's repeat the lines. e4, e5, knight f3, knight f6, knight takes e5, knight c6, this is Stafford Gambit, take there and play d3. Bishop c5, and at least you should remember this sixth move. The sixth one is bishop e2 to control the g4 square. So to remember, you can just watch my video on YouTube where I show that. Now let's get deeper into details and analyze the game played by Eric Rosen. He was playing with black pieces. Against a candidate master. He won the game, but you'll see it was completely winning by white. So e4, e5, knight f3, knight f6, knight takes e5, knight c6, knight takes c6, d takes c6, d3, bishop c5, bishop e2, and he played h5. White reacted with c3. Now he didn't play neither knight g4, he decided to play bishop b6 to move the bishop out of this tempo move. What do you think white should do in such a case? There are at least 3 good moves. I want you to find them. Any suggestions? Castle, bishop e3 and d4 looks nice. Okay, knight d2. Oh, knight d2 is definitely the move that we should take into account, and later we are going to analyze the game where white played such a move. What else? Bishop g5. Yeah, one of the best options, and this move was played. d4. No, d4, the pawn is hanging in the center. We can play this move right now. Castle, why not? But after knight g4, he's also threatening with queen h4, and we can't capture. It's too risky. It opens the h file for him. So the best move, according to my analysis, is bishop g5, but not right now, after a4 and a5. So a4 is played with the intention to chase the bishop, to trap it maybe. They have to react with a6 or a5, and in such a case you play bishop g5. Why it's important? Because in some positions the pawn on e2 becomes a weakness. So if now you move it with a temper and force black to play, it will be slightly better for you than playing bishop g5 immediately. However, bishop g5 immediately was played in the game. Eric Rosen chose the best move. He played queen d6, knight d2, and now he played knight g4. Maybe not the best move. Maybe here he'd better play something else. Let's say this move. But then bishop h4, bishop g3. White position looks solid. And white is also threatening with knight c4, knight b6. So knight d2 was played and knight g4. Now I think white made a huge mistake. They could definitely play better. What would you suggest for white in this position? Okay, so what, knight c4, d4. No, knight c4 cannot be played because of bishop f2, of course. Yeah, but d4. No, it's just an ordinary move, but the move that cements white defense. So, okay, there is a good comment from 4K83. Petroff is an opening known to have an equal position and get the draw if you follow the main line. If you do not follow the main, then you can get into trouble. Okay, I almost agree with you. Now, let me create another chapter and show e4. e5, knight f3, knight f6, knight e5, d6, knight goes to f3, knight e4. In this position, no, this is the main line. I suggest to play knight c3. Why? No, because if they go back, they lose two tempers. They have to take. This is the main line. D takes c3, and then white plan is to castle queenside. Maybe this move or bishop g4, castle. And if they castle kingside, we can initiate a kingside attack, which I believe will be more in white favor. If they decide to castle queenside, then here we have this tricky move, knight d4. What then? If bishop moves, no, we of course play f3 and then can play bishop b5 to take the advantage of the pin. If not, then we capture and take the advantage of the bishop pair. If they capture there, then queen takes d4 is a double attack. So, of course, this line is not obligatory to happen. They can play something else, but here, if you play this variation, at least you have two good options to castle queenside and initiate a kingside attack with your pawn march. Or to, if your opponent castles queenside, then you just have to control the center and maybe also get more space on the king side as well. So at least it offers clear plans. And to get better there, just play more games, analyze them, and analyze Grandmasters games there to understand the plans and ideas, and then just implement them in your own games. Okay, let's now go back to the game of Eric Rosen, who played knight g4. Bishop g4 was played in this game, but the best move is d4, of course. This is how we restrict the bishop activity. What then? Okay, what if knight h2? What do you think, guys? Is it a good move or not? What's your opinion? It's a bad move. Not because of e5. If you play e5 in this position, he goes queen g6, your bishop is hanging, so you don't gain the material. You'd better play bishop h5. Now this knight is trapped. So if, for example, bishop g4, bishop takes g4, knight f3, queen takes f3, and if now rook h1, you can just play knight f1 and get 2 minor pieces for a rook. 2 minor pieces plus 1 pawn for a rook. But because of your piece's activity, of course, it's a completely winning position. If instead g6 to be able to chase the bishop and then play knight f3, what do you think you can do? Knight to where? f3. No, I don't think so. Knight f3, they capture on h5 with their rook. So it's a blunder. e5, exactly, because now queen g6 cannot be played. So the queen can't attack none of our, any of our pieces. So queen moves, and then rook h2, and that's it. Of course, they take on h5, we take with our rook, but it's completely winning position anyway. So knight h2 is a blunder. c5, another good option. No, I can't say it's a good option, it's just a possible option, because actually black position is already bad. Our task is just to distinguish their initiative. Knight c4, queen g6 now, knight b6, a takes b6, but queen d2, and white doesn't experience any problems there. For example, then h4 and castle. And there is no attack, of course. c5 is maybe the best move. If queen g6 immediately, then h4, f6, bishop retreats, bishop a6, g3, f3 chasing the knight, and knight c4, for example. Let's take on b6 and castle. Absolutely winning position, no compensation, plus better pieces activity, so white is fine. So d4 was the best move, and there was nothing that could help black in this position. But white made a mistake. White captured it on g4, h takes g4, of course, to open up the file. Now 2 pawns are hanging. That's why knight c4, protect on d3 and attack the queen. No, rook h2 cannot be played, just knight d6 with a check. Queen g6, knight b6, a takes b6. Oh, here Eric Rosen took with the pawn, with the a pawn. He had a concrete idea. That's why he didn't take with the c pawn. But queen d2, and the position looks good. No compensation. White is still better. Not as better as they could be, but still with enough advantage to create problems for their opponent. I also want you to pay attention that we play with bishops of opposite color, and usually such a balance when you have one dark squared bishop, for example, your opponent has a light squared bishop, is in favor of that side who can create an attack on the enemy king. In this position, looks like nobody can create, I mean, none of players can create an attack on the king. Maybe white would have more chances because this bishop is restricted. Okay, bishop e6. This is what was played in the game. Castle, and now the key idea of black in this position. Maybe you'll realize it. What do you think black should do? What plan they may follow? This is where I want to pay the maximum of your attention to be able to learn it and understand. So what do you think what Eric Rosen created? Okay, Forky is absolutely correct. Double rooks on the H file. Forky, maybe you know how exactly to do this. Okay, another suggestion is just g4, g3 move, but wait a sec. What does this move offer? What if, for example, f takes to open the rook? So doubling on the h file allows the attack on h2. So rook a5, this is what he played. He decided not to castle. Moreover, he can't right now. He can play f6 and castle after that. But he decided to activate the rook this way. Bishop f4, king d7 now. And of course, guys, you understand that rook a2 is a blunder. Rook a2, rook a2, bishop a2, rook a1. If the bishop moves, it's just rook a8. If the bishop doesn't move, but queen goes here, just c4 is enough to trap the bishop on a2. Maybe not c4, but b4 is good as well. But c4 is fine. So rook a5. Bishop f4, king d7. Now they are threatening with taking on a2, but I'm not sure if this is what black exactly wanted to do, because even if we allow them to play such a move, for example, here we play, no, let's say queen e3, and then they take, we can just go to d4 and counter attack. Okay, so, but white decided that a2 is hanging and they need somehow to protect it. That's why they played b3. Rook a to h5. No, h2 is not hanging. Queen e3. f6. Rook f e1. King c8 to secure the king, because queen d4 was a dangerous check. And now it was better just to play bishop g3 with the intention of queen c7, queen f4 and queen c7. But d4 was played, a kind of a tempo loss. Now queen h7, now h2 is hanging. But there is no checkmate there. So what did white play? They played c4. And black reacted with bishop f7, which was another mistake. Instead, they could play g5, for example, or rook h2. For example, rook h2, bishop h2, queen takes h2, king f1. Now he may deliver a check and capture on g2. But after rook g1, they have to trade the queens. And the queen h3, you see, in this position, if queen goes to h2, it's just rook h1 that offers a trade of two rooks for a queen, which is in white favor. And if queen h3, we can trade the queens And if they take with the rook, just trade the rooks. Or if the rook moves to f3, we enter the enemy camp, for example. Moreover, we can no, let me show you. If he does that, we deliver a check, he goes there, and then rook h7 gains the pawn, and this is a completely winning position. If they capture with the pawn, we just take on g7. As for this pawn, we can always stop it with rook h1 and f3 if needed. Then our king just comes closer and we capture the pawn for free. So that's why maybe they decided not to capture on h2 immediately. But they could play g5. This move is slightly better if we combine it with rook h2 now, because the pawn is not on g7 but on g5 already. It leads almost to a similar line, but here the pawn is not hanging. Or no, if we take, they capture with the pawn and then they can play g4, so it's a little bit risky. That's why rook h1 immediately. They trade the queens off, and the position is still winning for us. So g5 was better, but actually didn't lead to more chances for black if white plays properly. Oh, maybe g5 was better, or king b8 just, or anything else, but bishop f7 was played, which is too slow. Why? Because after queen g3, the c7 is hanging. What do you think black played on the next move? What's your opinion? How to create complications here to force white to make a mistake? Just any suggestions are welcome. So what do you think? Should no, black can't protect c7 right now. Maybe they can somehow get a counterplay. What ideas do you have? Rook a d8. Okay, rook a d8. Interesting, but I doubt. For example, rook d8. Yeah, rook d8. Bishop c7, rook d4. Bishop b6, threatening a rook and a mate. So rook d7 is obligatory. Then, for example, I'll trade the rooks and checkmate. So I think it's a completely winning position for white. After queen g3, they played bishop c4, which was the best move. B takes c4, and now g5, because the bishop can't take on c7. If bishop moves away, then rook h2. That's why queen g4, check. If king b8, bishop g3, and white is a minor piece up, it's a completely winning position. What do you think black should do instead of moving the king to b8 here? So exactly, they have to play f5. Now, would you capture with your queen or capture with your pawn? What do you think? I just want you to know that I'm checking all the comments on Twitch and on YouTube. So all suggestions are welcome. Queen. Actually, they took with the queen, but it was a mistake. It was much better to capture with the pawn. Then pawn takes bishop. What then? Check. If king goes away, then just rook e7 is a winning move, and then just h3. If after this move they play queen f5, we can trade the queens, of course, but we don't need to do it immediately. We can just play f3. And if now they take and then capture on h2, just g5 and succeed with 2 pawns on the 6th rank. For example, this move f7 and the game is over. I don't know why white didn't notice it, but they captured with the queen. Queen takes queen, pawn takes queen, g takes f4, and what then? What do you think white should do to be able to keep a better position? Let's calculate the number of pawns. We are 2 pawns up at the moment, but h2 or f5 is going to be lost. No, h3 maybe, but they play f3 in such a case, trying to weaken our position. Rook e5 was played in the game and it wasn't the best move. What else? Instead of h3 and rook e5, what else can be played? What do you think? f3, what for? f3, they can take everything. h2 or f5. Of course, our position will be slightly better because of the extra pawn, but we can't say that that would be a winning position. Yeah, the best move here is g4 to protect the pawn. So if en passant, then f takes, they capture, no, they can take on f5, then we would have 2 pawns, just h4. 2 pawns on the side will decide the game. If they take on h2, oh, then you'll find what exactly to do. Okay, I just wanna ask you a question. No, g4 wasn't played in the game. Instead, they played rook e5. And after rook h2, can you believe me? White resigned. I have no ideas why. Maybe because they just didn't find the move that could save their position and at least offer a draw. So what do you think? What white should do right now to be able at least to equalize? Here, black is threatening with either a checkmate or a rook h1, which gains the move on a rook on a1. So either checkmate or gain the rook with rook h1 move. Yeah, okay, thank you, Forky83. Yes, it's rook e8 move. Why this? If king moves, just rook h8. Trading the rooks. If rook takes rook, king h2. And this position is approximately equal. So the number of pawns is equal. White maybe looks better, but if black plays properly, it's a draw anyway. But white resigned. Probably they didn't notice the way how to save their position and thought that the game is over. Okay, this is how Eric Rosen won the game. But of course you understand that he won this game not because he was playing Stafford Gambit. He won because just black maybe was low on time and made several mistakes. and even didn't find a way how to equalize the position with rook e8. So what you may learn? So you may learn that one of the ideas here is to activate the rook through the A file and replace it to the H file to be able to pressure on H2. This is the main idea. What to take into account? First of all, that it's not obligatory always to capture on G4. Taking gives him a bishop pair plus the open file. So every time you take, think twice. Maybe the knight is not dangerous on G4 and you'd better play something else. Okay, fine. Then we are going to talk about the next game that I prepared. Again, this is the game between two titled players. They are slightly above 2200, both. And that was almost the same position. So d3, bishop c5, bishop e2, h5. c3, bishop b6, so similar like Eric Rosen played. And bishop g5. Queen d6, so almost like Eric Rosen played. Knight d2, knight g4. And again, I don't know why, but they ignore this move. Maybe they already analyzed the game from the game between Eric Rosen and that guy. So, and decided just to repeat, but of course the best move is d4. Okay, bishop g4, h takes g4, knight c4, queen g6, and queen d2 was played. So everything is similar. Bishop e6, knight takes b6, a takes b6, and in that game, white castled here. Here, white decided to play a3, which doesn't really make any sense. The pawn wasn't hanging, there was no need. And instead of playing rook a5, which I actually find attractive here, black played rook h5. Bishop retreats to f4, and then they castle. So the king is safer on c8. A rook comes through this route. What do you think white should do? What moves do you suggest for white? How to continue? Of course, white realizes that black is going to put the pressure on h2 with three pieces, a rook and queen, two rooks and queen. Yeah, bishop g3 is definitely a helpful move, but what if c5? For example, threatening with bishop c4. No, actually, I can answer. There is nothing to worry about. Just queen f4 and castle queen side maybe. Yeah. So bishop g3 was a really good move. Queen e3 was another possible option. So there is no bishop c4, c4, c5, c4 also doesn't work as a plan, and white can castle to any side he wants. But if you castle immediately to protect the pawn on d3, then bishop b3, rook moves, and maybe bishop c4 with c5. Or just c5 first, then bishop c4. So looks risky, but still playable. White decided to castle, and that was a blunder. And can you imagine that such a strong player as 2200 player didn't notice how to gain the material here? If you were black, How would you play here? What do you think? So black gains the material, and this material advantage is enough to compensate. Yeah. Bishop c4. I mean, to compensate the pawn loss. Bishop c4 is better. So threatening to take the pawn, because if now d4, the rook is just lost. If rook e1, rook d3, and now I think it's equal, but black keeps the initiative. So castling was a mistake. Black didn't notice and just continued their plan and moved the d rook to the h file. Oh, again, bishop g3 and queen f4 looks like a good strategy, but a4. What for? I have no ideas. Maybe they just wanted to continue or start the queenside attack or anything like that. Rook f e1. Now black decided to capture on h2. Here it's better than it was in the previous game, where capturing on h2 simplified the position and white was fine. Here black has a strong attack. Queen h1, king e2, queen takes g2, queen f4, g5, and queen f6 was played. I believe the position is approximately equal if black decides to play rook h2. What does this move do? It allows black to play g3 and take the advantage of the pin. Instead, rook h3. Maybe with the intention of rook f3, but it actually didn't work. What do you think? How to play in this position for white? So please suggest anything, what you think is the best. By the way, guys who just joined this webinar right now, yes, you missed a lot, but you can watch the recording of this webinar later. It will be available for a few more days. Okay, queen g5 doesn't look good. Wait, queen g5, queen f3, queen d3, and so on. It's too risky. Yeah, it's rook g1. Rook g1, and if now queen f3, queen takes queen, rook takes queen, rook g3, and there is no chance for black to create a passed pawn, while of course rook versus bishop decides the game. If queen h2, which happened in the game, rook h1, offering a trade. Queen g2, rook a g1, and now they have to trade the queen for two rooks. So it's difficult to suggest anything else. But you may ask me, what if rook h2 and rook g1 here? Then queen h3, and so with the intention of playing g3. The f2 pawn will be pinned anyway. Fine, let's go back to the game. Rook h3, rook g1, queen h2, rook h1, queen g2, rook a to g1. The queen has no squares, and they decided not to trade the queens, but to sacrifice the queen for two rooks. Okay, for those who would like to watch the recording, it will be available in 3 different sources. First of all, in this group, here on chess.com at Tricks of Chess Club. Second, here on Twitch. And the third, on my YouTube channel. Just subscribe and you'll be able to watch it and to find it. Okay, so let's continue. So they traded the queen for 2 rooks. White is completely winning. The task is just not to make a lot of mistakes. A4 is hanging, queen is 7, threatening with a mate. King b8, check. Queen takes c7, rook takes a4. b4, check. King goes forward. Rook a1, I don't know what for, but it's difficult to suggest a move for black. c4 with the intention of c5. Rook a1, king goes to f4, then c5. Check, king goes to e5, b takes c5. And in this position, white could easily win. What do you think white can do to be able to gain the material or checkmate? Any suggestions are welcome. Okay. Queen a5, then queen c5. Okay. Queen a5, king b8, queen a5, king b8, then queen c5, and you what? Attack the rook, but rook moves, and it's not a checkmate, and you only gained the material back. I mean the pawn back. You can play better, and if you play b5, then you can get a winning position. How? Well, of course, if pawn takes, then this move, and we are threatening with queen a5 check. Now, for example, rook goes there, queen a5, king goes there, b6, threatening dangerous check. Actually, I think it's a mate. What can he do? Because king d6 and then queen a7, queen e8. There is nothing they can do to save except this rook sacrifice. Okay, what if, for example, rook a2? Then b takes c6 and the pawn is hanging with a mate. So rook b2, queen a5 check, king goes... Wait, no. In this position we can play better. We can play d4 to join the other pawn. Because if c takes d4, then queen a5, king b8, queen d8, and then we capture and gain a rook for free. Oh, yeah, you may say, how do we gain a rook for free if they can play just rook b6? Then we have just a similar plan of doing this, because he can't get rid of the pin. If he plays this move, he gets a checkmate immediately. Okay, so what else? Looks like this is everything. We covered everything that black could do, and this is how they could lose immediately. But white didn't notice. They didn't play b5, they captured g3 now. The pawn now becomes dangerous. And I think it was a good idea just to force a draw by repetition, but queen g8, which is a mistake. But black also didn't take the advantage of this mistake. Okay, now could you please tell me how black wins the game? You may find the tactical strike here. Well, bishop h3 was played in the game, and actually bishop h3 is even a losing move. I'll show you why a little bit later. Okay, yes, thank you. It's rook f6. What's the idea? The idea is to play rook g6 and promote. If they capture, then it's bishop h3 taking the queen. If king c7, rook g6, queen b8, king a6, queen a8, king b5, queen b7. But we can continue moving the king. And finally we can get it to a safe place. For example, queen, I don't know what, c6, king b3. But then nobody can stop us from promotion, or from promoting the pawn. So bishop h3 was played, which was a blunder. Then king c7, king a6, queen check. He goes to b5, queen takes b7. And in this position, he'd better move to the a file, but he moved there. However, white didn't find the checkmate in one, which is queen b6. White played this move and then just gained the rook. However, the position is completely winning. And black lost the game. Okay, there was a question to play when to play queen b7 earlier, in which case. For in case of rook f6, king c7, rook g6, queen b8. Here queen b7. This is what you mean, but still king a5. It doesn't change anything. It's a similar position. Okay, fine. So yeah, this is how white won the game. They were completely winning, then losing, then again winning. But here black applied the same idea. They castled and decided to double the rooks on the h file. So keep it in mind every time when you play Stafford Gambit. This is the only active plan that black can apply. And think twice before castling in case if the h file is open. Now again, bishop g4 was a critical mistake. If you play, for example, something like d4, you could avoid all these complications and just get a better position, as I demonstrated when we analyzed the previous game of Eric Rosen. Fine. Let's now analyze the last game I prepared for today. Again, it was a 2150 player. I mean his rating is 2143, and the black player rating is 1950. Why this opening is called Stafford Gambit? Good question. No, actually, it's named after one of the famous players who applied this variation. I believe it happened in 18th century. Okay, however, it's not the point of our today's discussion. Yeah, Staffordshire Bull Terrier. It's named by the dog. Thank you. Thank you for explanation. I didn't know that. So because of the opening being so aggressive, it's named after a dog. Okay, anyway, so let's continue the game analysis. E4, E5, knight F3, so the same opening moves, bishop E2, H5, C3, bishop B6, and instead of playing bishop G5, this time white decided to play knight D2, which also looks good. Knight G4, D4, but now queen comes that way, H4. However, G3. Queen E7. No, the queen moves back, pressures E4, but actually not. In such a case, we can play knight C4. And the pawn here is not hanging. If they take, just F3. Bishop E6 was played. Knight takes B6. Now, A takes B6 is still possible. But black decided to capture with the C pawn, not just to improve the pawn structure. H3, knight F6, and bishop G5. Now white is threatening with E5. They move the pawn there, so I believe white is unlikely to castle to the king side. It's too risky. The pawn on H3 will be hanging anyway. But right now they are one pawn up and threatening to take on H5 or to play just E5. So queen D7, the pawn is hanging. They don't want to trade the bishop for a knight right now because it also opens the G file, and also white loses the advantage of a bishop pair in such a case. That's why queen C2. Knight H7 attacking the bishop. Bishop moves back. And now black could just gain the pawn back. What do you think happens if black does that? So what's your opinion here? Should white activate their pieces, trap the bishop, or do what? Castle queenside just to ignore. Bishop h5 looks attractive, but looks too risky because of this discovered attack. So maybe yes, and white is still better. Yeah, it's actually still possible. But instead, you'd better just play f3 with the intention to trap the bishop with c4 d5 move. Castle queenside, knight f6, and then just c4. And if we play d5, the bishop won't have any available squares, and the queen would have to stay on d7 for a long time. But that's why black didn't take. They took on h3 later. They castled first. Castle. Well, actually, if you want to avoid all the complications, just play h4 here, and the pawn will be safe. And this is what I would play in the real game if I were playing this position. Castle queenside, queen e7, king b1, prophylaxis. Knight f6, bishop g5. So they have to repeat the position again. Queen d7, bishop d3, rook gets to e8, bishop retreats to f4, and this is where they took. But that was already a blunder. So please look at this position and tell me, is there any activity for black? Would you like to play such a position for black or not? And what is actually a white plan here? Okay, so while I'm waiting for your answers, let's find any active plan for black in this position, what they can do. Can they push g5? Maybe they could somehow, maybe with the help of the rook and so on, but it looks like no. It doesn't allow them to do anything. White has not only one extra pawn. White has much more benefits. They already control the center. They have a bishop pair, and of course this bishop pair is much more active. So no active plan, while white can just play d5, c4, d5 maybe, bishop with e5 or bishop e3, then c4, d5, and just damage their position. But they took on h3. They were sure that they gain the pawn for free. What do you think white should do to take the advantage of this blunder? f3 c4, yeah, it's actually still possible, but there is a much better option. It's e5 exactly, because if now knight moves, rook takes h3, and in case of queen h3, bishop f5. That's why after e5, bishop g4. And of course the best way to play here was just to take on f6, bishop takes there, rook takes there. The pawn cannot be taken because of bishop f5, but black can save the pawn by playing g6 and at the same time secure the f5 square. But it's still winning for white with a bishop pair plus pieces activity. Oh, bishop pair for a rook. White played another tricky move. They played f3. Bishop takes f3. Yeah, what else to play? Two pieces are hanging simultaneously. That's why they take. But now bishop f5. And they have to block with the rook. But they lose everything. At least one minor piece. Now, if bishop d1, rook d1, and it's pretty safe. g5 was played. Bishop g5. Queen d5, I don't know what was the idea, maybe to attack on g5, maybe something else. But there is no need to take right now. c4 can be played. Queen was sacrificed on f5, queen f5, but now black gains the queen back. However, black is bishop down, and of course the position is absolutely losing, and this is where they resigned. So what I would like you to learn in this critical moment of the game, instead of playing bishop g5 or a4 a5 and then bishop g5, like I recommend, white decided to play knight d2, which actually, well, the computer thinks it's inaccuracy, but actually it's still a playable option. Knight g4 won't work. d4, queen h4. So just don't be afraid to move your pawns here. You are unlikely to blunder anything. Just look at what your opponent does and ask yourself what is his idea behind this move. And the main thing is that the pawn on d4 is supported with the c3 pawn, what means that the enemy bishop can't join the attack, and this is the main benefit. Okay, guys, I see you enjoy my game analysis because the number of viewers slightly increased. Now it's 21. So what do you think we should do then? Would you like to analyze one more game? Okay, yeah, let's do another game that I prepared. It was also the game between two title players. One of them was 2252, the other one was 2150. Why I'm not showing Grandmasters games? It's because none of them play Stafford Gambit, because they all understand that this is an unsound gambit and white definitely gets a better position, and every Grandmaster, I believe, knows how to play exactly to be able to get a huge advantage against Stafford Gambit. Now you may learn it as well and beat everyone on the internet. Okay, another game with 45, knight f3, knight f6, knight f5, knight c6, bishop e2 here, h5, c3, bishop b6. And in this position, we decided that bishop g5 is good. Knight d2 can be played as well. a4 is probably the best, but bishop f4 was played. Now, the idea of this move is just to develop the bishop and secure the h2 square. Prepare for queen h4. So queen h4, you can play just bishop g3. This move is not as good as previous options, but still offers a better position for white. Knight g4, d4. You see, now queen h4 wasn't played because just bishop g3 with a temper. But now they can play g5 with a temper. Where do you think the bishop goes now? What's your opinion? Oh, bishop c1 is too passive, but why not? Yeah, this gambit is quite aggressive, but too risky. Oh, bishop g3 was played. Not e5, definitely not e5. We don't want to ruin our pawn structure. So bishop g3. Maybe c5 can be played in this position, and c5 is probably the best move. d5, c4 is a blunder. If something else, let's say this move, then knight d2. This is how black could continue. But they played h4, and I believe you didn't suggest bishop g3 because you were afraid of h4. h4 almost traps the bishop. No, actually traps the bishop. Bishop e5 doesn't look good, just knight takes e5. After h4, the h pawn is no longer on h5, so we can just take the knight. H takes g3, f takes g3. So the second extra pawn for white in this position, and no compensation for black. They played c5. Oh, of course, d5 was the best move. However, white decided first to trade the bishops, and then again d5 was a better option for them, but they took on c5 with the intention of trading the queens. So of course d5 was pretty safe and could offer much more possibilities for white. Queen g4, knight d2, castle queenside, and just a domination. But here white realized that their advantage is enough to win the game, and their task is just to trade pieces off. That's why they played d takes c5, queen d1, king d1, bishop c5. And yes, I absolutely agree with white. The position is completely winning. It could be much better, but it's still a winning position. Knight d2, king e7. This is a technically winning position. Just let's look at the moves that white played and how they successfully realized. h3. So now the king side is closed. Rook e6, attacking the pawn, but the pawn is already protected with the knight. Rook a e1, bishop d6, knight goes to f3. Now e5 is a kind of a threat. g5 pawn is hanging, that's why bishop f4. Knight goes to d4 and then f5, of course. No, first a3, we can move to f5 anytime we want. c5, f5. what does this move offers us? We can now play h4 or g3. King goes to f6, rook h f1, preparing for h4. King e6. Oh, h4 looks like a good move as well in this position. h4 because they can take, and if we play h5 we create a distant passed pawn. Let's say this move, bishop moves away, and then just h5, and h6 looks too risky. I mean, this move would force them to keep one piece holding the pawn on the 6th rank. However, rook f3 was played instead, not the best option. Maybe you can tell me what is the best move. There are two moves that are much better. What are they? Who knows? Oh, g3 is not a mistake, but it's not the best option. G3, just bishop e5. What else? Okay, I'll show you. It's one of the options is e5. The other move is knight g7. Knight g7, if king goes there, it's knight f5. But I believe e5 is slightly better. Why? So because then we can play this move, or we can play g3 on the next move and trap. And if they take, we play knight g7. The bishop is trapped, pinned. They have to play either king d6 or king d5, but king d5 leads to rook f5, creating another pin, and then the bishop is lost. Actually, no. If rook f5, f6, of course, but c4 here. Or king d4, knight f5 mate. If king d6, then rook takes f7. So if king d6 now, then still rook f7, and it's a completely winning position because now we take the advantage of our rook activity. So e5 was the best move. Now rook f3 was played instead. Rook d8, rook e2 to secure this square. Bishop e5, knight e3, knight goes to d5. Rook e4, rook f5, f6, and in this position I don't know why, but rook f1 was played. Of course, the best move is just this, rook to f2, threatening to take. For example, rook e4, knight f6. It's a strong initiative for white. If, for example, rook f8, then what do you think can be done? So just king d3 to protect the pawn. c4, okay, I can just go back, but then I'm threatening with rook g5. If, let's say, this move to pin the knight, h4, g takes h4, g5, f takes g5, rook takes g5, this is how I activate my rooks. Okay, rook f1 was played, not a mistake, but kind of inaccuracy. Rook c8, rook d1, rook a6, rook f1 again, b4, so black opens the position. A takes b4, c takes b4, but just knight takes on b4, and that's it. Oh, bishop c3, the last sacrifice, which definitely didn't work. Oh, checking there doesn't make sense because of knight b2. Rook a3, knight b2 anyway, they take king b1, and this is a completely winning position because of an extra knight. No, this is how white won. I don't know why black didn't resign earlier. So what you may learn from this opening, of course not the way of how to play the endgame, but actually white didn't do almost any mistakes or inaccuracies realizing the advantage. From here you may learn that even if you play not the best move, but an ordinary move, your position will be still better in Stafford Gambit if you're playing with white. And another thing is that if here the h pawn moves, they give up the knight on g4. So when next time you decide not to play bishop g3 because of h4, think twice, because the knight on g4 requires a lot of support. You are taking it twice, and that's why he needs two pieces protecting it. If only he pushes, he also loses a piece. Okay, fine. So that's all that I wanted to tell you about on this webinar. Do you have any questions? And what do you think about the next webinar? Would you like to participate in the simul next Sunday instead of our ordinary webinar? Oh, any suggestions are welcome. I'm also planning to conduct one more simul during this week, no, this upcoming week, I mean, but I think it will be a night time for Americans, and I'm going to conduct it more for Australian people, and some people from Russia and India. And guys, of course, don't forget to watch my YouTube video. You can find it on my blog. So this is the link. And then you can watch the video of how to beat Stafford Gambit, just a short video where I explain the basics, the first 6 moves that you should learn, and then the variation that may happen. Of course, it's much more important to understand black ideas, and one of their ideas is to double the rooks through the H file, like for example happened in Eric Rosen's games and the other game that we analyzed. But you see, this idea is unable to succeed if you play properly. Okay, so thank you for your attention. Don't miss our next webinar next Sunday. Follow me on YouTube, Twitch and chess.com. Thank you for your attention.